Welcome, everyone, back to Mount Manitoba, the home of NotInHallOfFame.com, and, of course, the sister sites, the Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame, the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the United States Athletic Hall of Fame. Vinny and I encourage you to vote after you're done listening here. Go to www.notinhalloffame.com/USA, and you can be part of history, because you're all going to decide who is voting for the United States Athletic Hall of Fame first class. The top 25 people will get in, and also we're going to have 10 coaches, 10 contributors. So we're pretty happy about that. Today we're talking about someone and why he should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And Vinny and I are part of another project where this man his name has come up. And Vinny today is making the Hall of Fame case for ... Take it away.
I'm going to make the case for. I've done the case for Laverne Dilweg, but I'm going to take him to a case on his teammate Verne Lewellan, who some would argue was even better and more dominant than Verne Lewellan as a football player.
You mean more dominant than Lavi Dilweg?
Verne Lewellan, some argue, is more dominant than Laverne Dilweg. Well, Laverne Dilweg was an end, but Lewellan has mostly been a back and a punter.
I read something going into this today. It's an article from a few years ago. So this was before Butler got in, and I bring that up because it was Clark Judge who talked to the Packers historian and asked, you probably read this also or are aware of it, and he asked him who was his most wanted Packer at that point. And he was expecting Butler. That's why I sort of mentioned the time on that. And to his surprise, he said, it's Verne Lewellan. And Clark Judge said, I wasn't even that familiar with who Verne Lewellan was. So it's a really interesting piece. I know that you and I both got a piece written by Corey.
Yes, Corey's been a big. Yes, Corey's actually the one that said, "Hey, he suggested, hey, why don't you do this case?" Now, I'll be honest. When it comes to Lambeau Packers, for the most part, usually I look at Isbell's case and I look at Dilweg's case. Llewellyn's case is not someone that's on my radar as much as the other two, but there is a real argument to be made that he was arguably better. I was speaking to Dominic Legionak's son, Mark, that's another guy that should be in the Hall of Fame, about, the Packers that he knew about. And he explained to me that Lewellan was always someone that was seen as one of the best. He said that was his father's favorite player also. And he was close with him as a part of, the executives. And he was really a part of the organization up until the 60s. But this is about his entire body of work. Well, not just as a manager, but also especially as a player for the Green Bay Packers.
Part of that dynasty, and it's funny, when you think of the Packers dynasty, everyone immediately goes to the 60s. There was another one, 29, 30, 31.
Yes, I would argue that when Lambeau was the head of the Packers, you could make a real case that dynasty was better than the one that Lombardi had, because they won a championship in 29, 30, 31, 3 in a row, then 36, 39, 44. So in that 15-year stretch, you win 6 championships.
It's like the modern Patriots.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, they're essentially the reason why I call them Title Town is not just because, they won the first Super Bowl. No, they won the most championships, period. 13 in total. If you talk about the 9 pre-Super Bowl and the 4 Super Bowl championship, that's 13 in total.
I was seeing another piece too, where another historian sort of did as retro MVPs. He gave Lewellan 2 of them, I believe,
that
29 and 30.
That is true. 29 and 30. Many would argue he deserved the MVP for both of those years, as he was the glue guy of the Packers for all 3 of those 29 to 31. He was granted his career just as a player. Granted, he also was a GM and whatnot, but as a player in general, he had a 9-year career. But when he was playing for them, when you talk about a true winner of the game, whenever he played for them, the team had a 752 winning percentage, 79 wins, 26 losses, and 10 ties.
Part of the offense, I believe.
What?
He was the heart of that offense, I believe.
He was the heart of that offense. He absolutely was. Like I said, he was the glue guy. He was the guy that, even when he was in college, he was one of the four horsemen of Nebraska and, Notre Dame. And when Lambeau encouraged to sign him after he took him, he ended up with 307 career points in offense, which at that time was the most ever in league history. And also, he had a record of 50 touchdowns, which was the most all time. That was not until that passed until 1941. That was until I'd say almost a decade after he retired. So he had a record that stood for almost a decade with touchdowns. I know 50 touchdowns today doesn't sound like a big deal, but back in those days, it absolutely was because the games were a lot closer and they were low scoring.
Well, absolutely, and I think even the modern football fan can understand that. Uh, just from what we've seen in offensive explosion with wide receivers, as opposed to running backs, and just the quick change that we've seen in just the last 10 years. So it shouldn't be that hard for even a fan of 2023 with what we've seen in football's evolution or de-evolution, depending on your point of view, I guess, in the last 10 years to understand the statistical difference that would encompass. Now, Lewellan and virtually almost everyone else in his era who are not in the Hall of Fame, it's very, very hard to get people excited about that. I can't point to game film. I can't point to even great stats because they weren't kept. All we can do is go from, we don't even have first count people anymore. All we've got is essentially a lot of newspaper write-ups and just people who, well, mostly the people who have compiled all of that and have done their great research on that. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that Llewellyn is part of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Hall of Very Good, that research group.
2009, class of 2009, he
Okay,
was
so I'm right.
added there. He was
Oh, so
also he was also a finalist in 2020, but with him, Dilweg, and Isbell, they all kind of just canceled each other out, which
yeah.
which is a little disappointing. But at least they were named finalists, and we did get Bobby Dillon that year, so at least you got one Packer from the pre-60s era in. But looking at Llewellyn, he was a 4-time first-team All-Pro. He also was a really exceptional punter, which he had like an average of 39.5 yards.
That's pretty good back then.
Oh yeah, it was really, really good. He
None of
was
those guys were followed. Well, I'm assuming they weren't, based on watching a lot of 60s punters.
no, he was
No follow through with the leg.
he was dominant. He was very, very dominant for the Packers. He's someone that, like Cliff Crystal said that he said that I'm looking at a quote right here. The
Is that
graphic
the
at the top.
Packers historian?
Yeah, Cliff Crystal
Okay,
is one
that's
of
the
the
one
Packers
whose name I
historians.
couldn't remember. Okay, yeah.
Donald Sipes is also another one of them. The graphic at the top, a copy of Packers stats grew Eric Goss's recreated play-by-play, offers small samplings of what they like. I'm looking at what Corey wrote down because he showed me this stuff. Lamb embraced strategy and tried to capitalize on Llewellyn's talents in every way he possibly could. 15 of Llewellyn's punts were marked inside the 10-yard line, and 10 of those left the offense starting between the goal line and the 5-yard line. That's why Lambeau's game plans were basically built around Llewellyn's punting and seizing the rare opportunity to score a touchdown. I still haven't seen anyone who could punt the ball down, Johnny Bloodtoe's biographer. He kicked deep and very high, so there was just any other chance of a return. Let's talk about the kicking game now, but it was even more important in some of the low-scoring games we had. If you could out-kick the other team by 5 or 10 yards, you could practically march for a touchdown just by exchanging punts. He was accurate, just great at the coffin corner kick. So that tells you right away, like, even as a punter, he was very dominant and one of the best punters ever because of how much he affected the game on the field.
I think also too, we forget. Sometimes I forget. I shouldn't say. I know you don't, but I do. Especially in this era of specialization, for anyone to be that good at that many things, that doesn't generally happen today. It's not that they couldn't, it's just that it's a lot harder because that's not what they're there to do.
Yeah.
It's even a big ask now for somebody to reimagine changing from left guard to left tackle.
Hmm. You also look at the two-way backs that played in the two-way era from the first 25 years of the National Football League. Mind you, I'm not including the pre-NFL eras as much as I would love to. I'm only including 1920 to 1945. In only 105 games, Verne Lewellan was top for the most amount of touchdowns in the league. But everyone else, Johnny Blood McNally, 137 games, 49 touchdowns. Bill Dudley, 90 games, 44 touchdowns. Clark Hinkle, 113 games, 44 touchdowns. Dutch Clark, 75 games, 42 touchdowns. All these other guys I'm listing below are already in the Hall of Fame, but Verwellen has more touchdowns than all these people already in the Hall of Fame. McAfee, Nevers, Strong, Grange, Battles, Driscoll, Ganado, Conzelman, Nagurski, Lehmans, Parker, Friedman, Pollard, Guyon, Lambeau, Vaughn, Herbert, Thorpe, and Luckman.
Does he have? Well, I'm sure he does, but like, or is great. Like, does he have grandkids that are alive now, or is there anyone pushing for his case within his family that you're aware of?
Corey told me that he does have a family member that is alive, but unlike some other people, I haven't really looked up into his family as much. But it's not a situation like with Charles Fowles' family, where you have his great nephew been pushing his case. It's more, and it's not like a brawler where he has a few people. This is more like a Heffelfinger situation where it's like there might be relatives out there, but we need to find where they are. And whether he has relatives that are living or not, that doesn't mean he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I mean,
I'm just wondering if there's like an internal family thing, because you've sort of like alerted me of something going on, I know that he was just on the Talk of Fame podcast.
yeah, Matt Coons, that's George
Yes.
Coons' son.
Right, right. So, and we've seen that with Jennifer Matthews pushing, Alicia Kramer pushing for her dad,
Yeah.
which was eventually successful. So it's not uncommon to see. So it was just more of a curiosity to see if there was a family member sort of doing that.
Yeah, I when I spoke to, Mark Lejovic, like the name's like part Mark, if you're watching this, sorry, the last name is it's not coming from me. There's not many people with that last name here on Long Island. But, I mentioned he said that his dad he wants to see make the Hall of Fame, and he mentioned how he thinks that Lee Remmel deserves it. He thinks that Jack Venisi deserves it. Like these are like longtime Packers that I told him that some people think not as highly on his father or some other people and say the people, and he told me straight up the people that don't say that don't know any better and don't know how much a person like Llewellyn or my dad, whether people meant to the organization or just the sport as a whole.
Mhm. Okay.
But yeah, I also really appreciate Mark for willing to speak with me on the phone.
Yeah,
If
no,
you're
for
watching.
sure. You've been doing some great work. Also, before we sort of end this up, one of the shows that you did earlier for us was on Leroy Edwards, and you messaged me. And is that something that you can sort of share now, or?
Yeah, I can do it right now.
Okay.
Because yeah, back in like I think it was like late 2021, one of my
I'm
early
still in
my
Barbados.
yes, you were in Barbados.
Yeah,
That was my last that was my first ever case
that's
for
good.
a basketball
Yeah, yeah,
person.
yeah.
My first ever basketball case because I've been wanting to do one, and Leroy Edwards was the obvious one for me because Mikan said he was the best he ever went up against. He had so many records that held, three-time MVP, just everything said, yeah, absolutely lock. And he's still not in the Hall of Fame yet. And many historians that have said this said like, hey, he's the biggest snub. Turns out, on that video, Dan Edwards decided to comment and say thank you. And I saw his name a few other times. So I started looking. And so I look at the Indiana Sports Hall of Fame, and they're starting out. They've inducted a lot of people in the last few years because they need to get the ball rolling at first. And I noticed that, Edwards was still not there. So I decided to call the guy that runs it, Tim Turpin. I tell him about Leroy Edwards and everything that he did. He said, you know what, Vin? Let's get him in next year. And I'm like, wait, what? Serious? Yeah, let's get Leroy Edwards in next year. I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. Yeah, yes, you heard that right, people. I successfully got Leroy Edwards into the Indiana Sports Hall of Fame. Me. not anyone else. This is what I did.
There you go.
I'm like, granted, it's not Naismith, and I spoke to people at Naismith. They know that he's very deserving. But now that
We
this
don't even
happened,
know who the voters are there, which is insane.
the main curator said that he's very deserving.
Right, but
The curator, which by the way, that same curator saw our video of Max Zaslowski.
okay.
Yeah, he really liked the way we did things. Um, and so after that, I said, okay, I gotta find Dan. So I look all across the internet. I try to find any contact information for him. Then I find a obituary of his mother, and it mentions where Dan lives. And I said, okay, then he's probably still there. So I look for like another director, got to look online. And then I find a phone number in Illinois. I said, this is probably it. And so I give it a call, the message. I say, hi, Dan, it's me, Vinny Lospinuso. I just want to let you, I did a podcast on onthehalloffame.com that you made a comment to. I want to let you know that I got your father, Leroy, into the Indiana Sports Hall of Fame. It's going to take place in July. I also told him how I got his number and everything. He got in touch with me,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, thank you. You made my day. My entire family, my wife, my sister and her family, and all our adult kids and their families are going to come and see this in July.
There you
And
go.
it's and I told him, hey, this is one further step to Springfield. And he said the people of Kentucky told us that when we put there, but anything that's possible, this really means a lot. And
Mhm.
I just made that 73-year-old man's day.
There you go. Gotta love it. So who do you got for us next, do you think?
Hmm. You know, baseball playoffs are coming up very shortly. And you can say Seawolf was kind of one, but I need to step up with, baseball. And
Okay.
my unfortunately it's only done like a little bit, but they're doing a non-players committee this year.
Yes, they are.
And I
Okay.
have to do this. Listen. Yeah. Uh Evan talked about him. My dad talks about him. Everyone here talks about him. Everyone in Manhattan or the Bronx, everywhere, doesn't matter who you are. Let's do one that's truly, truly special for home. Let's get George Steinbrenner.
Ooh, okay. That'll be a good one.
Well, I have to. I mean, this is a relatively recent one, I understand, but come on, I gotta do this one. I gotta do George Steinbrenner.
You can look up for your research when he hosted Saturday Night Live.
Oh, don't worry, I don't need to. I already known that.
Oh, okay. All right, that'll be interesting. So Vin, thanks so much. If you like what we're doing here, we've got a bunch of other shows here in the Bucknerverse. The Bucknerverse. That sounds a little pompous, doesn't it?
Again, like I said, he's still more successful than DC's. I mean, have you seen this just bomb after bomb for them?
It's me or George Steinbrenner?
No. DC Comics. Their movies have been bombing at the box office.
I made the mistake of trying to watch She-Hulk. I know.
That's Marvel, not
I know.
DC.
I know that, but I just said I made a mistake on it.
Hey, listen,
all aware.
well, at least you didn't see, Morbius or like
I have
those
not.
other ones.
I have not. Anywho, other things that we do, along with Andrea Testman and Brad Nelson, we look at how the hell was this a hit tomorrow night, or tomorrow night as in terms of recording when they go up on air. I don't know. But tomorrow night, I'm looking at Styx's, the song that pretty much ended them, Mr. Roboto.
That's my favorite song of theirs.
Well, it's not their favorite song.
Well, I'm not them.
I suppose that's true. But we are going to look at that one. With parts made in Japan. Secret, secret. I've got a secret. Yeah. I am the Madrid man. Sorry. So I've been listening to it a lot lately as I've been prepping for that.
Well, you gotta have to.
I kind of have to. There's the weekly Hall of Fame show with Evan Nolan, where we look at Hall of Fame news from around, well, really mostly the United States over each week. There's going to be a bunch of shows coming up soon in the fall. The Classic Sports Review with Glenn Pulowski. The last one we did before we went to Antarctica, it was the Disco Demolition Night game. And with Paul Lawrence, we've recorded about 5 episodes of classic Super Bowls, so of the Retro Football Review. So all of these will be coming up soon. Oh my God, there's so much. I don't know how I do all this, but I do. And I do it all for you. There you go. With that, wherever you are, wherever you may be, have a good one, guys.
Yeah.